Hello and welcome to the Lore You Know, the first episode of 2021. We made it. We'll see how this year goes. Welcome. We're talking about the Scarred Lands, Darakeene. I'm Jeremy Hochhalter here with my guest host, Sarah Stewart. Let's dive into it. So last time we talked about the Gleaming Valley, so moving across the continent. In between is the Fouled Forest. So here on your screen, you can see the map if you're listening on audio later. There is a large mountain range.
My map is like behind my head, so it's way easier to see
Right.
that map. I said pointing to the screen that's showing me the Twitch stream. But yeah, so... And of course, I foolishly didn't research the Fouled Forest, but apparently there wasn't much to research, so I don't feel so bad.
In both editions, in 3rd edition and in 5th edition, there's not a lot there. It talks about how the Fouled Forest is, of all of the forests, actually pretty healthy. In fact, it's a little creepily too healthy, where it like keeps growing and it replenishes itself if it's cut down. So people try and hack their way through this foliage. It reminds me a lot of kudzu, if you've ever been to like the American like southeast, or I saw it a lot in like Virginia has kudzu and stuff, where it grows over everything. And
we had that, but they were called blackberry bushes.
I've heard blackberry bushes are pretty aggressive. Which is why we didn't plant any. So
we north, both living in both the northeast and the northwest that I have lived of the U.S. and blackberry bushes were the bane in the northeast certainly, and not as much in the northwest. But I think that's because everybody's smart and doesn't plant them. But I have
totally
seen blackberry bushes get out of hand in a couple of places in the northwest.
Nice.
But not to the level of kudzu. I don't.
Yeah. Yeah, kudzu is like a super aggressive vine that just like takes over everything, like other trees, buildings, everything. And it doesn't really say what the plants are in the forest, but because it is still considered a forest, I'm assuming there are trees, and there might be vines and foliage that are like creeping around. And it really talks about how no one really travels through it. And if they do, they often get trapped by this foliage, or the marauders, who I think I couldn't find any 3rd edition reference to them. But they're
so they might be a new thing.
So they're in the 5e SLPG, the Scarred Lands Player's Guide, and it talks about how they're led by a iron-bred woman, and I don't know if this is her art, but I'm going to throw up this art anyway.
Given that they're led by an iron-bred woman, I would make the case that probably are brand new.
Right, unless it was.
I have my own theory about the Foul Forest.
Yeah, and that theory might come from the other group, or the other person really, that's in the Fouled Forest, which is Yugman the Wise.
Yugman the Sage. Yugman
right?
Shows up constantly over and over again throughout all of the classic books. Not as quite as much in the new books, but then again, it's called Yugman's Guide to Ghelspad, so there you go. He's the guy who presumably... I joke and I say he's the dungeon master from the old D&D cartoon.
He is.
I was thinking, he kind of... Well, when you hear his description, he looks like that. And his description's interesting, because in the old Wise and the Wicked artwork, they have this amazing description of him written, and then you look at the picture and they don't look anything the same.
Of course,
he's got he's supposed to have curled, pointy-toed shoes, and he's supposed to be really short. And they're like, is he a halfling, or is he a human, or is he something else? We don't know. Is he a fae? Is he? All they know about him is he's really old. He was around before the Divine War. How long, they don't know, because it's like he just sort of showed up one day. He's a wizard, and he's like stupid powerful, epic level. Back in the old 3.5 and the old 3.5 Wise and the Wicked, or 3.0 Wise and the Wicked, he could basically cast Time Stop almost at will. And he always, it was his shtick in terms of rule set, was he always got a highest initiative. It didn't matter. Only a god could have a higher initiative than Yugman. And so always in the first round of combat, he would cast Time Stop, figure out what the fuck was going on,
right,
do his spells, and then fuck with you. you know, and you just couldn't fight him. Because he would just do that, and it'd be like, time stop, and I teleport away, or I
Right.
cast several delayed blast fireballs at you, or something. I don't know, whatever it was he was going to do, and really only a god could interfere with Yugman. So he's meant to never. You're never actually meant to combat him any more than you're meant to combat a god. He's meant to be the ultimate MacGuffin.
Yeah.
NPC.
He is the quest giver. He always has that, little question mark
Yeah.
over his head. Come get my quest.
So my theories around this, and again, this is my canon in my brain, is that he's the reason the Foul Forest is the way it is, because he lives in this magician's tower, and there's no description of this building anywhere, other than it's a wizard tower, in the middle of the forest, and he doesn't want people to bother him unless he intentionally wants them to bother him.
Right.
Because he's gonna read them, and so he makes the forest impenetrable because he wants people to fuck off. So that's my theory about why the Foul Forest is that way.
Damn kids, get out of my forest.
Exactly. Because he's just like, no, I want to do my wizard things. But I have theory number 2, which is about who wrote this stuff and when it was written. So I'm about the same age as most of the writers, most of the original writers of this Cardland stuff, and some are a little bit older, but most of them are around the same age I am now, or most of them now are. I am the same age they were, ish. Back then they were all in their 20s, and there was a thing that there was a series of fantasy novels that was ridiculously huge in the late 80s called the Xanth series, and
With
everybody read it, and it in retrospect was absolutely terrible, but we thought it was great because we were 12. And it was this really cheap, almost pulpy fantasy series of novels that weren't quite YA, but they weren't adult. They were sort of in this weird, like, they didn't slide into adult fiction. There was no, sexy times. They didn't get explicit. And violence wasn't explicit, but it was a little bit implied. They were comedical, and they were kind of terribly written, as there was literally, this man had 2 plots ever. And yeah, I give him props of anyway. I could talk about Piers Anthony, but I won't. But Piers Anthony created this character called the Good Magician Humphrey, who was later replaced by some other good magician. Was it Bink? I don't know, somebody. Spoilers for Xanth novels that were written 40 years ago. I don't know. 30 years. So I think that Yugman this age is basically a Good Magician Humphrey influenced character. And Humphrey, the start of so many Xanth novels was a character had a problem. They needed advice. Humphrey was the advice giver. They would go to his tower, and to get there they had to go through 3 obstacles of some kind that Humphrey devised based on the person who wanted to speak to him, and they had to overcome 3 things, and overcoming the 3 things would inevitably answer their question more than actually talking to him would. and then they talk to him and go, I had a question for you, but I think I've just figured it out because you just gave me 3 challenges, and now or they'd ask him the question, and then he'd be like, yes, marry her. Whatever it was. And Yugman just feels that vibe to me. He's just feeling very Good Magician Humphrey.
Right.
Yugman, I wouldn't say is good. He's chaotic neutral, but he's not evil. He's just kind of nuts. But one thing you can say about him is he wants, and it's consistent pretty much in the writing, is that it's for the benefit of Skarn. It's clear that he mostly works with, quote, the good guys. He acts as an advisor to he shows up a lot as someone who's advised the folks in Mithril and the folks in Vesh, as a lot of the books are written from those people's perspective, and they're like, and Yugman gave us this information, and so it's clear that he's definitely got an associated with him. He was there at the big council thing that they did, and so he's mostly good guy, but he's chaotic neutral. He does have his own motives around things. And honestly, he's just a MacGuffin. When you need somebody to point the party in a direction, Yugman shows up and he goes,
Right.
"Do this." You know, he's Mordenkainen. He's the guy.
Yeah.
So, and that's all I had to say.
Yeah. So it does talk about like in 5th edition they updated it slightly. There's not really much written about the Fouled Forest at all, but they do talk about how like in 3rd edition it's like really scary to go into, mostly because the plants will eat you and you'll get lost and you won't come out. But in 5th edition they introduced this character of I'm sorry, I forgot her name. Hang on one sec. Her name is really hard to spell. Thruaxulu. Thruxalu? I don't know.
Who sticks an X in the middle of a name?
Oh man. And it's not a dragon, which is really confusing. That's totally a dragon name. So yeah, this Ironbred, not a Sutek, but an Ironbred, you know, leads the Marauders, which is this band of bandits, that essentially go out and steal your stuff when you get caught in the forest. But it talks about how, like, the Ironbred might know secret ways through the forest, like, and locations within the forest that have been, you know, lost to the forest to time that adventurers could go to. So it is a great, even though it sounds like a terrible place to send your adventurers, it really is a great place that people could go. And, you know, if you want to go and write stuff for the Fouled Forest on the Hairier Vault over on Drive-Thru RPG, that'd be great because it's an awesome place to go.
Being there.
Go find, right?
Yeah.
Go find and fill up this place.
But if you're looking to be consistent with the other lore, I would just say, and anything to do with the Foul Forest, Yugman's behind
it. Fair enough. But, you know, it talks about there's probably ruins and stuff that are in there that you could go in and find all this treasure, but most people don't come back out because the forest.
Or Yugman I think most people don't come back out because they find Yugman, ask their question, and then he bamfs them somewhere else to do some kind of quest. And the next thing you know, you're off in Asherak, you know, and you never come home because, you know, that's my theory, is that people don't come out because they really screw up and he just kills them because he realizes they're horrible people, or he's bamfed them off to some quest somewhere and they don't come out because they're off doing something. Because he's, you know, the ultimate gaze giver. It's like, you've crossed me. I will force you to do this thing.
Right.
For 100, you know, for 100 days, you have to go clean the statue of Corian's feet or something. I don't know.
Right.
But that's a Yugman thing, you know. So that's my theory, and also that he's probably hired those brigands to be yet another obstacle in the forest.
Very well could be.
But, yeah.
The other thing the 5th edition lore does...
So I might crash anytime.
Okay. The other thing that the 5th edition lore does talk about is are paths in the southern part of the forest that you can essentially go north of Hollowfaust, go around it if you didn't want to go to the city, if you're going from the Gleaming Valley into Darakeene, or vice versa. Supposedly there are hidden paths that are somewhat safe compared to the rest of the forest. So... technically, there are ways if you need them to get through it. So
you really don't want to go north because that's gonna get you near near the Cat Druid, evil druids, and that's bad, and the Vengarak Vale, and that's bad.
Right.
South is to get Murmur Pass out of Gleaming Valley, but then there might be. Otherwise, you're hidden into the Yakrutan, and that's bad, and then you have to cross the river and. But yeah, Darakeene is very well protected.
Yeah. Yeah. And so speaking of Darakeene, after passing through the Fouled Forest, or however you get there, you come to this very large chunk of land that doesn't have a whole bunch written about it, but we're going to talk about what it does have.
Yeah, it doesn't, it's not as big as it's bigger than Vesh, significantly bigger than Vesh. It's not as big as Calastia, or certainly not as big as the Hegemony. But it is... The way I look at it is we've kind of got 3 major, what I would call farm country, like feudal societal vibe locations in Ghelspad. The lawful evil guys in the Calastian hegemony, the neutral good, chaotic good guys in and and lawful good if you count Mithril and Vesh Mithril in that area. And then Darakeene, who are basically the neutral guys. Fundamentally, when you look at both their government and their society, they're very neutral, lawful neutral mostly, but not in a Hadrada way like you get in Holofaust and Lokil and those places, or Hadrad, but definitely more neutral, I'd say, just the thing in between. So when you're thinking about like if I've got a bunch of PCs who come out of kind of rural country farming kind of community, you're probably going to want to come from one of those three regions, and Darakeen's kind of a good other one. It almost feels overkill. Like, do we need this many fantasy country things that aren't? Because at least Classy and Vesher have this Cold War going on. Darakeene isn't involved. When you look at the enemy list, both in the new books and the old, it's none. It's like enemies are none.
Allies
which
also.
Is shocking. It shocks me that like none. I mean, arguably Titan spawn, because if you're not a Titan worshipper, Titan spawn is going to be your enemy no matter what. But that's a big non-organized thing.
Even though they don't say it, I feel like Titan spawn's always a given. Like.
Yeah, it's a given. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure they'd fight back, and they do fight back. They do talk about various Titan spawn invasions from things, not in any great detail. The struggle with talking about Darakeene is it doesn't have this long involved history. Like Celestia, we had all this like, and the grandfather of all that business, and Vesh, at least you go back to the forming of the Vigilance. Darakeene, we know it was part of the leading empire, but so was most of Ghelspad. Politically, it implies that, but there's not even really anything beyond the current emperor. Like, who did he get it from? I couldn't find any obvious history for it. Admittedly, I didn't go back and reread every single book, but it's Darakeene doesn't have a book of its own, so it's not like Holofaust where you had a publication or class yet. It goes back to this current emperor, and yes, but politically, it is the United Provinces of Darakeene. So at one point, and this makes me think they're the United States. That's alarming. At one point, they were individual provinces, and I don't know if you do you have the political map I sent you? I found this map on a random Reddit blog. I don't know how random it was. It was like a Google search. I don't remember how I found it. I found it probably last year. Maybe somebody put it up on something else, but I researched it up yesterday because I remember having found it. And it was like posted on a Reddit blog maybe a year ago, so it's not that old, but I was very impressed by it. What was the name of the guy who I sent you the name of the guy who posted it?
Yep, Grumbleskin, and I've thrown.
I don't even know if the guy.
I've thrown.
Thank you, Grumbleskin.
Yeah, I've thrown their
whoever you are,
their user link up on the chat.
This map. I don't know where the origins came from in terms of accuracy. That might just be an assumption based on where rivers and forests are and where you would set things up, and just various descriptions that there's not a lot. I know Wexland is supposed to be southwest coastal, southwest coastal, so that fits where that would be, because Wexland is described in some of the other text, and obviously the Phylactric Vault is about right, and this is based on the coastal map, but how accurate are these political boundaries? I have not done the research to confirm, but my opinion was this is as good as anything else. So, is this canon? No, I don't think so. But it's pretty cool, and I like the map. So, I would use it for the lack of anything else if I was going to be running a game in Darakeene, because it's pretty cool.
And it does have, in fact, the only city that they have a map for in Darakeene is Meliad, which is here in the South Winterset province. I think this icon right here is what represents it on this political map. For those of you watching.
And in both the old and the new lore, and by the old lore, I'm mostly drawing from the Ghelspad campaign setting, and then for some of the other stuff that I'll talk about later, Secrets and Societies, Player's Guide to Wizards, Sorcerers and Bards, and the SLPG. And the Creature Collection, the new SLPG and the new Creature Collection.
So up here.
Where was I? So as I said, it was these provinces that basically sort of unified together under this one emperor. It isn't clear if he conquered them or why they unified. Was it does definitely seems to have happened post-war, like not necessarily post-war, but as a result of the war, maybe, because it was like we needed, maybe it happened during the war. We unified to fight the Titan spawn, and it's clearly they're on the side of the gods there in that regard. They describe it as no particular god that they hold above others. They're universal. They're like, yes, all the victor gods, cool. We like them all. So there's that. They don't hold any specific god higher than others, or at least traditionally. Mostly human population. In the classic lore, it was minorities of halfling, elf, half-orc, and dwarf. In the new lore, they call out Asathi and Slytherin, which in my book, it was just, we need more places where Asathi and Slytherin show up, but I don't know. It was like, what happened to those elves and dwarves and halflings? And I don't know. But either way, it's mostly human population. They do specifically call out that Ironbred and Asathi from the Accrudan have been kind of showing up, which maps redeemed Ironbred and Ironbred are redeemed. Ironbred and redeemed Asathi. But these migrations of them are apparently illegal and inspiring separatist rumor mill. The separatist thing is interesting. So canon lore never really gets into what happens here in terms of the original books, but and this is the other thing I'm pulling from, which is the Forsaken trilogy, the Vladimir's Adventures, bringing back that which abides. There's these 3 novels that come out in the same time frame. And there's also a short story that leads up to that called 3 Dreams of Belsmith. Written by it wasn't I don't want to quote who wrote these. I don't feel comfortable with it. Was it Stu Wyke? I want to say. Anyway, Vladimir and 3 Dreams of Belsmith, he's like, he leaves home and goes off and basically makes the decision in that book to bring back, to try to do something to resurrect the dead elven god. And he ends up in Shelzar and meets this noble lord, who's basically I don't remember his exact title, duke or something, of province of Darakeene called Wexland. And he talks him into this, and it's still not clear. Vladimir Medley's like epic level and very charismatic, and the Titan Slayer and famous dude who was responsible for taking out Churn, so big, awesome guy, convinces this nobleman to not only follow his god, his dead god, but to get his people to do so as well, and to get his people rally behind him to follow that which abides, and drums up a whole mess of worshippers in a very populist way. And throughout the earlier books, before Vladimir runs off adventuring to put his god back together again, and it's sort of in the background, it's like, it doesn't go into very much detail, but inspires Wexland to claim independence from the rest of Darakeene with this nobleman as their new king. How much the people of Wexland cared, I don't know, but they worshipped that which abides enough to give enough like worship juice to put together to bring the god back eventually at the end of the series, which is one of the ingredients you need to resurrect a god, is faith. And given that the high elves, who really should have been the source, most of them kind of were sullen and didn't give a crap anymore because they were all depressed after 150 years of infertility and misery and doing horrible things with humans. He's like, I'm going to go to the humans for inspiration that aren't in our continent, as far away from Termana as I can get. Almost to the absolute western coast of Ghelspad, and find a bunch of humans who are willing to worship a dead god so that we can resurrect him. So that was the thing of Wexland's independence. Now, in 5e version of Scarred Lands, they haven't brought back Jen Davies yet in any kind of official capacity. So, and there's just these little notes of inspiring separatistness, independence, presumably. But they also say that, that the people of Darakeene in general have an independence streak. So it sounds like the Emperor Clume's hold over Darakeene is a bit tenuous. That's all, guess on my part, though. Again, not a lot here. So that's kind of all I have for history and politics. There's not a lot. There's a bunch of cities that show up on this map. Not a bunch of history. They also added in 5e the language of Darakeene, which I don't think was a language in the old lore. I don't remember running into it. They just said they spoke Lydian. And as a former Lydian Empire, and pretty much most of the remains of the Lydian Empire, if you're going to find any areas that really still believe in those causes and kind of support that history, like old Rome, this is Italy, that this would be the closest thing to anywhere else in Ghelspad of people who kind of still, and it feels like the capital of the Lydian Empire was probably in this region as well, although there's this place called the Plains of Lead. But to add to the confusion there, the perforated plains used to be the Plains of Lead until the current Plains of Lead took on that name, because that's fun. So the capital of Lydian Empire was in this region-ish somewhere.
Yeah. And it does talk about
And
how the root of Darakeene, the language, is Lydian, so it's
what's
probably
suspicion?
yeah, it's just like Old English
Probably,
versus American English. They could
or
probably understand
Italian
each
versus
other.
Latin or something.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
so I'd consider Darakeene a dialect of Lydian. Lydian, picking up Darakeene wouldn't be too hard. Darakeene, it's just Darakeene, and it's not even Darakeenian. There you go.
You'd think so, right?
I think so. So the one thing that we can say for sure, though, is Darakeene was built on the remnants of the Lydian Empire, and the Lydian Empire fell hundreds of years ago, and there was this whole era of barbarity that took place between the fall of the Lydian Empire and basically the resurgence of the various places prior to the Divine War. And the one thing that was kept that they carried over was the war colleges. In the Lydian Empire, there was all of these. They called them. I want to get the term right. Various war legions. What's the term? The term right. Cool. You're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, there was these legions of soldiers, and they cohort. It is. I know the cohort doesn't feel right to me, but that's what they were called. And basically groups of soldiers who fought in various wars. And when the barbarians came and invaded the Lydian Empire, and as the Lydian Empire fell, one of these cohorts, legion things, survived and ended up in the region that later became Darakeene, and sort of basically kept their shit together and carried on a lot of the values and training and philosophy and everything around these original warrior ethoses and whatnot that they had in the Lydian Empire. And I can't say they founded Darakeene, but they certainly influenced things there. And eventually, as Darakeene kind of became this kingdom and got their shit together, they established these war colleges. Darakeen's basically known for three things. Well, four if you count the proximity to Yugman. Three things, which is wheat. They farm a lot. War colleges, and a college and a place of magical study. I can't even call it a university because it's more complicated than that. But the Phylactric Vault, and pretty much Darakeen's known for these three things. like we grow food, and we have warriors, and we have magic. Very very Dungeons and Dragons, really. So these war colleges fundamentally have been around for hundreds of years, since the days of the Leading Empire, and it reestablished, but just evolved in these various locations across Darakeene. In the old lore, there were 3 war colleges. One in Canton, one in Malad, and one in Wayside. And Wayside's in Wexland, so that's interesting. So if Wexland did secede, or does eventually secede, they have their own way college. They have their own war college, so that's cool. And each of these colleges were focused on a specific type of military expertise. Canton was infantry, Maliad was cavalry and siege troops, and Wayside is archery and marine assault. Makes sense, they're coastal. In the new lore, because we decided to throw that away, I guess, or maybe we didn't, I don't know. There's 5 major colleges listed, plus a handwave of minor colleges that specialize in certain things. I don't know if this is meant to be location-based or just how they study. But it's listed as Claiborne, which is close combat, hand-to-hand. Glamourhill, which is warrior spellcasters. Hammerdale, which is infantry that use warhammers. Plague? Really? Maybe they worship Vangal. Plague, but who are scouts, reconnaissance, and espionage. So it doesn't even feel like Vangal. It's more like Tunnel, so I don't know what's going on there. And then Wake, which is marine and sea mages. So I was like, it's cool that they've got these funky names, although I don't know what the origins of these names are, and they're not really explained. But they don't seem to be located, they don't seem to be about a location, although you could map them to the old colleges. But I was just like, why did they muddy this up like this? A little bit annoying.
So in chat, it's brought up that it might be coming from the Guide to Fighters and Barbarians, which is actually...
that I didn't research for this that I should have researched for this.
It's funny because there's a group of books that came out for 3rd edition that sound like they're for classes, and they are, but they actually were like 4 classes for Scarred Lands.
I am remiss in that I, of course, should have looked up Fighters and Barbarians.
Exactly. So damn many.
Because I did look up Player's Guide to okay. I did not do enough research for this damn episode. My bad. Whoever called that, thank you. She's now searching frantically through Fighters and Barbarians to find this reference. Guessing it's in the Fighters section.
Is it the Colleges of War?
Colleges of War. My question. I'm boring everyone now with my just looking this up in the middle of the episode. Darakeene, here it is.
Yep. Wake, Plague. Yep. Good catch.
Like, oh, they all came from this. Good catch. Who called this out? Was it Travis? You said Travis?
No, there's Alon.
That was Alon. Oh, of course it was. The one person who probably knows more about Scarred Lands than I do. Thank you. Okay, Darakeene Military Colleges. So they created this contradiction way back in the day. Thank you, original Scarred Lands writers.
And for what it's worth, this book came out after the Ghelspad book, so as far as updating it to 5th edition, it probably makes sense that they went with this direction instead of the original, even though it was like really a more obscure book, because unless you knew this was a Scarred Lands book, you weren't like picking it up. So yeah. In fact, the cover of the book doesn't even have the Scarred Lands logo, nor does it mention Scarred Lands.
Yeah, it just says Sword and Sorcery. Which is cool.
I will give them a caveat that the back of the book has the logo in the bottom left-hand corner, but okay, so.
But anyway, I'll look that up later. So anyway, it's not super important, because the most important thing is what happens from the people who go through these war colleges. It's 9 years of study, and afterward, if you manage to graduate, which is brutal, because 9 years of study in a war college doesn't sound fun to me, because normal colleges is 4. So those are like graduate level, doctorate level of war college. Doctorate in killing things with sticks. After you graduate, you're guaranteed a job pretty much in any group. And what's interesting is people who graduate this aren't part of the Darakeene military. It's not like you graduate from War College and you're now a general as part of the country's military. It's that they have these mercenary groups. And basically, Darakeene is the source of most mercenaries across Ghelspad and beyond. So if you want to hire mercenaries to fill up your ranks, this is where you find them. And they're pretty much whoever's got the coin, they'll do it. So it's interesting because Vesh is like, we've got the Vigils, we've got a standing army, we've got real military. Calastia, they've got the battle mages, they've got the big army. Lagini, they've got the big army. Even Shelzar has their weird wizard spellcaster defenses. But Darakeene, you don't really hear about their own army. You just hear about their mercenaries. So presumably they have some kind of military force just to beat back any random Titan spawn. Or they just pay their own mercenaries. And what's the difference really? It's whether they pay you as a hired mercenary or as a member of their army. They call them up. So, and the pay can be quite lucrative depending on which legion you end up in. Two of the most famous legions that come out of these war colleges, well, one that does come out of the war colleges is Legion of Ash, which is really cool. They're described more extensively in both the SLPG and in Secrets and Societies. And probably also in the Barbarians and Fighters book. I haven't reread it yet. My bad. Like 5 books this week. Forgive me. So the Legion of Ash, you have to have graduated from one of the war colleges. They draw from all sources, all types, and they have these really wild traditions where they make this pasty stuff out of the ashes of fallen members of people fallen in battle as part of their mercenary guild or legion. Take their ashes, mix them in this paste, and then as new initiates pass their training, because once you join the Legion of Ash, you have to train again with them for 2 more years on top of the 9 you already did. So after 11 years of training, then they put this ash paste on your face, and you go through this ritual, and you become a member of the Legion of Ash.
And then you run out and you hit people with your cane because you're so damn old at this point.
Yeah, I know. I'm thinking okay. So nobody in the Legion of Ash is under the age of 30.
Yeah.
I guess you could have joined the war college at maybe 15, 16, maybe.
You're in your mid to late 20s at least.
At least, your minimum, you're in your late 20s, dead minimum. So, and what's also interesting is, so the Old Lord says their minimum to be in the Legion of Ash, you have to be at least a 4th level warrior, and I'm like, 4th level warrior, like a 10th level something. These are badass. These guys are, we're talking CR 10 or higher, and in my opinion, in terms of 5e, that's where I'd place them, because after that much training, these aren't 2nd level fighters. I can tell you that. So how you want to do it, but and there are prestige classes around this that you get. And what the coolest part is when you get this ash paste put on your face and go through this ritual, they also kind of claim you. Well, not really claim you, but people who get this special ability where when they die, they can choose to stay as a spirit and continue to be participating in the Legion of Ash as a wraith or ghost or specter or choose your favorite undead. But a spectral undead. They're not zombies or skeletons like in Hollow Faust. They are the spirit. So they burn the body, and then the spirit can live on as continue to be a member of the Legion. And it's wild because they're considered there's 10. They divide the Legion of Ash into cohorts, which is where the name came from taking that name from the leading empires description of these legions. So cohort is like a subset of a legion, I guess. 10 official cohorts, and then this 11th one that's unofficial, which is the cohort of all of these ghosts. And they come in as advisors, as spies, as psychological warfare, where they'll haunt the enemy forces so they don't get any sleep the night before the big battle, kind of thing. So just really wild. I'm like, wow, imagining having a military where you're just like send your ghost army out to go spy on the bad guys, and they're all ethereal, so they like, unless the bad guy, and not necessarily bad guys, because Legion of Ash could be the bad guys, but the enemy, and say like, the enemies better have some kind of ghost protection going on. You're gonna get spied on as they go over their battle plans, and this ghost floats in and is looking over your maps over your shoulder, or possessing one of your generals.
Yeah, you know, like thinking about it, because you were talking about how they're not zombies, they're not skeletons, they're these spirits. Spiritual undead are almost always more powerful. I mean, almost always. So that's terrifying if you were on the receiving side of that. You know, back especially in 3rd edition, you level drains and enervation and stuff that doesn't really carry over to 5th edition. But damn.
So they are considered the greatest mercenary force, probably on Skarn itself, on anywhere. Certainly in Ghelspad, no question. And unless Asherax got something cool up their sleeve, almost certainly across anywhere on Skarn. So this is kind of awesome, unless there's a bunch of dragon mercenaries. I don't think so. So I would say yes. I would say yes, the greatest mercenary force on Skarn. And like, they'll work for anybody, and that's the scary part. As long as you got the coin, they will work for you. And they've the history here describes that they've got these 10 cohorts that are spread out all across Ghelspad. And the one thing they do make sure is that they don't ever have 2 people hire them to have their cohorts have to fight each other. They're like so, like, if they've got a cohort working for Calastia, they're like, Vesh, you cannot hire us. we're not going to have our people fight each other ever.
Right.
So it's like their one policy of who hires them, and probably their only policy of who hires them. They don't give a crap if you're good or bad or whatever. The proof of case is they've got an entire cohort working for Livid-Autel, who we talked about a few weeks ago.
Right.
So Livid-Autel can call upon their own mercenary group working for the Legion of Ash kind of maps. What was interesting, though, is they're like, do they have these spirits because of their association with the necromancers? And it's like, no. They've been working with these spirits since the Lydian Empire.
Yeah.
Because the original cohort that founded this and carried over and founded these war colleges were spirits, or became spirits shortly after they founded this stuff hundreds of years ago, before Darakeene was even a nation yet. So, yeah, I think if anything, the necromancers want to know how they did it.
Yeah.
Very thick. And I imagine Nomorga would be like, no, you have to go on. So I imagine there's several people who are like, this is bad, Legion of Ash. No biscuit. And that's really interesting. And again, they're not really beholden. They don't talk about any of them being religious or beholden to any god, except maybe a little bit Chardoon, but I think that's just mostly because the Legion of Ash are mostly, for the most part, lawful evil. Their generals, they have 3 generals. The main general, General Dame Greta Botar, who's lawful neutral. In the old lore, she was a fighter rogue, mostly fighter, from Wayside. And she took over when her husband, who was the previous Lord General, died, and she was already one of the top 3 when he died, and she took over for him. The next kind of in line is Lieutenant General Halius Thanakos, who's a very charismatic fighter, a little bit of bard in there, lawful evil. So that's lawful neutral, lawful evil. And then Brigadier General Agragon, I love this, Gravelfist. Totally canon. I didn't notice this when I named Van Gravelfist in Vigilant. But Gravelfist, the name, I didn't come up with that name. That name comes from the Gravelfist tribe of orcs in the Plains of Lead. So presumably he's from that tribe, and that's why he carries on that last name. That's why Van has that last name. So I was like, ooh, that's funny. That's fun that we have that connection. So presumably General Agrong is somehow related to Donengar, who's the ruler of Trojugna. Maybe some cousin or something, because they have the same name, or at least came from that tribe. That's cool. And he's also listed as lawful evil, fighter barbarian. No surprise. So he's like third in line. Dame Botar is not super popular, mostly because of her whole agreement with the necromancers of Glividatel. And her implied heir, Thanakos, is super popular, very charismatic. People like him, which is kind of interesting because she's considered lawful neutral and he's considered lawful evil. So the lawful evil guy is more popular. Go figure. And people want him to take over soon because they don't really like her that much. I think they're just sexist. There you go. I don't know. This is an implication there. That they have a plan for her to retire soon and just wander off, and he'll take over, and they'll find a new third. And each of them graduated from those war colleges, just like just about everyone else in the Legion of Ash. So that's cool. And their HQ is in Darakeene, of course, in Arboth. I don't know if that's the name of the city or the name of the HQ. Is the name of the city. Okay. Oh, Legion of Ash, kind of interesting. I think I covered most of it. And they're kind of small. Only 5,000 troops, which is like the size of one of the larger vigils in Vesh. So not a big fighting force in comparison. Then the other most famous legion out of the war colleges, although they're not exactly out of the war colleges, is the Legion of Crimson. Also in Secrets and Societies, and in the, I don't think they're covered much in the SLPG. These are the people who didn't cut it in the war colleges. So graduate from war college, if you're awesome, you go to the Legion of Ash, or if you're maybe less evil, or some other thing, you find another mercenary group, or found your own, or whatever. If you've screwed it up, and you couldn't manage to hack out all 9 years, or just didn't even try to go through the war colleges, but you want to be in a mercenary group, the Legion of Crimson will probably take you. Because they'll take almost anyone. If you can hold a sword and won't fall over, they'll probably take you. They were originally founded in 74 AV, so they're not super old, 75 years old, by a dozen guys who basically get kicked out of the war colleges, who were drinking at a bar and went, we should make our own mercenary group. And they're led by this kind of crazy lady, Tanitha Veneer, who was like, yes, because she was this like noble from Shelzar, this rich heiress from Shelzar, who was also a fighter, who was like, I've got all this money, I want to be a mercenary queen. So she goes up to Darakeene, finds a dozen drunk guys, and goes, let's form a mercenary group. And they're like, sounds good. We'll dye our armor red and go and kick ass. And that is exactly what happens. Is they dye their armor red, put on red clothes, so the ultimate red shirts. I just realized that they're the ultimate red shirts because they kind of are red shirts. And they go out and they form this mercenary band, and they go on for a few years, and then they get hired. Their first big mission is to go to Ket Kurdet, which is where all the crazy necromancers are. And we haven't even talked, not necromancers, crazy druids are, and we haven't even talked about them yet. They go on this expedition, and these are like Gorak follower cannibal druids, and their employer is basically like they get hired by this guy and go on this mission, and they get their asses kicked. They get ambushed by cannibals, and the guy who hired them and his major guys get dragged off by the cannibals, and they're like shit, and so they're just running away, the mercenary group, and they're like, get out of here, and they manage to escape. They don't keep their employers safe, but they manage to keep their own asses safe. They manage to get out, through Tanitha's brave leadership. But apparently she did a good job, because she gets a visitation from Chardoon, who's like, I like you. You're gonna work for me now. And you're gonna do my thing. And she's like, sounds good. I am groovy with having a god back me up. And she goes multi-class as cleric, effectively. She goes and starts worshipping Chardoon. And the Legion of Crimson suddenly gets hugely popular. And they explode. And by 113 AV, they've turned into a very sizable force. And at this point in AV 150 in modern times, they've got 30,000 troops who've joined this legion. So they're 6 times the size of Legion of Crimson, because they'll, as I said, take just about anybody. And they're like, we'll bring in the orcs, we'll bring in the iron. We don't care who joins. You can be anything. We're groovy with it. Although there are plenty of orcs in Legion of Ash too, but and they're kind of cool. Their headquarters is as well in Darakeene. It's called Crimson Hall, and I think it's here. They said it was on the border of a forest in central Darakeene, which place it about where I just pointed, in what was an old manor house that they've converted into an HQ. This manor house is, while there's no map of it, it is described in ridiculous detail. So I want somebody to build a map of this building, because it just sounds so gloriously wonderful. As there's all these levels, and there's like a smoking room where people go and smoke and get drunk, and there's like this low ceiling bedrooms for the troops, and then there's like a basement area where the dwarves hang out, and there's these towers and stuff. It just sounds really cool. Imagine like a room of trophies or something like that. So fun there. And it has also a massive library of military history, where every member's name is listed, and as you join the Legion of Crimson, you get to sign the book, be a part of everything. And in recent years, their leader, Lord General Malcolm Daguerre, who took over at least 2 Lord Generals down from the heiress from Shelzar, he basically stays there now. He apparently came down with major depression, poor guy. Going through COVID, I can get that. I can get where that can come from. And has just been hermiting in the Crimson Hall now for quite some time. And super depressed and bummed out, just hanging out with his dog in there, and that's where you can find him. So there's some interesting stuff there, I guess. So if you want to, like, we go to the Crimson Hall, and there's this general here who's just sort of like, want to get drunk with me. I don't know what's going on here. So this I don't know what the intention of that is, but he certainly would be an interesting NPC to counter, and maybe there could be a whole plot around how to get him out of his funk. Although he's sort of kind of a dick too, so honestly, all these guys really are kind of interesting. So that's the war colleges. So I said Darakeene was known for 3 things: wheat, war, and magic. So the last thing known, and less part necessarily of Darakeene, but within the Empire, is the Phylactric Vault. That's right on the northern, it's not on this map, but on most maps puts it on the northern kind of central corner, not far from the Titanstone Mountains. And I almost consider the Phylactric Vault its own city-state, because it is part of Darakeene, but it isn't super beholden to the government. Not that anything really is. As I said, they're pretty loose about this sort of thing. But it started out as just this center of knowledge, arcane order, with a bunch of alchemists going, we're going to do alchemy. Let's put some stuff together and make things. And then a bunch of transmuters, wizards, like, I guess that's the spell school, transmutation, alchemy kind of go together. There's basically transmutation, wizards, and alchemists hanging out, doing their thing. And eventually other wizards started showing up, and they built this sort of magical college, although it's not calling the Phylactric Vault a college. While it talks about that, it doesn't seem to be organized that way. It's not like you have a syllabus and have organized classes and sign up in the fall or kind of a thing. It's more like, does someone want to teach stuff? You can have that room over there. Who wants to sign up? Um, and you go in, you say, here's my 500 gold for the year, and they just let you do whatever you want as long as you reimburse them for any spell components you use while you're there. It's kind of like that. And you can pay 500 gold, and then you have to add to the library or contribute to it in some way, protect the library. And that's really all they ask. And you expect to participate in a class. So you come in and you either are a student or a teacher or a teacher's aide or whatever it is when you're there, and it's expands, and their whole intention is just to expand the knowledge of magic. Phylactric Vault at this point in AD 150 is probably the single most major use of magical lore anywhere in Ghelspad, certainly. Lokil known for general lore, Holofaust known for necromancy specifically. Various other locations have their niches. These guys are just magical lore and focused on everything except necromancy and evocation. They don't do battle magic. They're like, there's other people who do that. We honestly don't like violence. We'll defend ourselves, but if you're here to enhance, if you want to come here and try to enhance the properties of Fireball, go somewhere else to do that. That's not what we do here. So no evocation, definitely no necromancy. But pretty much everything else falls under here. And they've even invented their own magical schools of, I'm gonna get this right, onoromancy and chronomancy, dreams and time, which is neat. Like the magic of dreams, Arias loves these guys, and the magic of time travel, of time, like, take that time stop spell and do even more. And I am amused at how close in proximity they are to Yugman too, because Yugman's is also a time wizard as well. So kind of neat there. And yeah, did I miss anything, Jeremy? About Phylactric Vault?
Nothing I can think of. Like,
Yeah.
in Travis's games, I've been there enough, but a lot of that is like Travis whipping stuff out of his head. So,
yeah. And I've certainly run things in the Phylactric Vault as well. It is led by Archmage Chancellor Nerith Alia, who I've run NPC Nerith several times and kind of love her as a character, but she's my own interpretation of what she's like. A bit cold, but to the point, kind of my thing. Or if this is the way you will do things if you are going to be at my vault. Makes sense. I think she's lawful. And yeah, great location to go in terms of that kind of thing is you could be uh, if you're a wizard, you could be somebody who'd studied at the vault. You could be somebody who wants to try to get into the vault and earn enough money to go there to, I need my 500 gold to get in. Or you could be, and they do take promising wizards, like a sort of a scholarship program. So if you're from a poor background, but you have a talent for wizardry, they'll let you in even if you don't have the 500 gold. And I don't know if it's 500 gold just to get in or 500 gold a year. It wasn't clear. I suspect it's like yearly tuition. I don't know, but I don't know how you earn the money if you're doing research. I don't know. But I'm tenure. I don't have to pay the gold anymore. You pay me now. But like in comparison, if you're a member of the Legion of Ash, you make like 21 silvers a day. So, add all that up. A lot of mentions of money in these old texts that the new texts don't even bother with. Like, how much do things cost in 5e? I have no idea. So was it 500 gold fee to get into the Phylactric Vault in 5e? It's a good basis. So, okay. Anything else about Darakeene that I have missed?
Nothing I
No,
can
he
think
shook
of.
his head. All right. The other areas I wanted to cover, because it's sort of in this region, are the islands that are just to the west of Darakeene. There's basically 3 major islands. There's well, 4 really. There's Caria and the little tiny island of Tarak, Uria, and the Drifting Isle. Caria and Tarak are part of one country, I guess, of Caria. Sovereign nation of Caria and Tarak. Capital of Dosan in Caria, and a couple of cities, including one called Oblek, which is the best name for a city ever. Ruled by Queen Tagani. Caria is a new country in a relative sense. Only founded in AV 125, so 25 years. That's a really new country. And not a lot of is known about these islands. But basically, she was a ship captain, or basically a admiral of the Darakeenian military, of Darakeenian naval forces, and decided basically to fuck off and form her own country and navy. and the Emperor of Darakeene was like, you are my navy, so I don't have a navy to stop you from being your own navy, so I guess I'm just fucked. And she just takes off with their navy and creates her own country. You do. And it's weird and random. They are assumed to be a monarchy, but in so much as there's only been her. It's sort of like Vesh was like, we're gonna call them a monarchy in the books for lack of another description. Mostly populated by humans with a few other elves, and halflings and whatnot. Old lore says they worship Madriel, which I found endlessly amusing, because there's nothing about them that describes that says Madriel. It's like, these aren't neutral good people.
It's all in the way that they choose to believe. Yeah, this is my personal choice. I'm going to totally worship this, but I'm going to do this other thing. Doesn't mean she grants them powers. Doesn't mean like she's okay with it.
The new lore says all gods are all gods equally, and kind of ditch that whole Madriel thing. Allies and enemies. This listed none in the old lore. In new lore, it says they're allies. Darakeene, the Drifting Island, Uriah and Darakeene. Uriah and the Drifting Island kind of makes sense in terms of other islands in the region. Allied with Darakeene, I was like, they kind of betrayed them, but they're not actively at war with them, so that's allying with Darakeene. It's sort of like, well, we'll just have more of a truce between Darakeene. We only stole your navy. But there's that. I pictured Queen Tagani as like the ultimate pirate queen. I've always pictured her this way. I don't know if she's intended to be the ultimate pirate queen. I think of her like that. She's done trade with Charduhene. She's also fought the navy of Charduhene. It's whatever. It's all kind of muddy, and she's a bit random, and another interesting MacGuffin is do with her what you will, and if you want to have your own Tortuga on Karea, I would say it would not be inappropriate. So, except the sea is now clean and not made of blood, so only difference between, I don't know. I think it's probably a little bit more civilized, except of what's in the jungles, and this means like Karea is very far north. How does this island have jungles? Because it doesn't have the excuse of being warm like the Blood Sea, and it's really not that far from the stiff-finning sea, so how does it have... Are they temperate jungles? I don't understand why there would be jungles in a northern island. I would think it would look more like Ireland. Not... That doesn't make sense in my brain, but there's apparently jungles there. I'm expecting because latitude-wise it would be more like England or something, not the Caribbean, but apparently it's jungles. And this is one of the places where you can find bat devils, which is neat. We haven't really talked much about the Pitterin. That's like one of the other obscure races in the Scarlands. In addition to horse people, cat people, cow people, and all the others, you can play a bat person. And their Titan spawn name is Bat Devil, and their redeemed name is Pitterin. And they're basically funky. Their arms are wings like a bat, but their feet are really like hands. They have like fingers in their feet, and they can, wield a sword with their feet, and it's kind of neat. And they fly around and beat you up.
Whoop. Okay, so I know I saw them in the in a 5th edition book, but I don't remember which 5th edition book updated them. Do you recall?
The Wise and the Wicked.
Wise and Wicked? Okay. So if you want to play a Pitterin, then head over and pick up the Wise and the Wicked from Drive-Thru RPG.
Yeah, they're an interesting race. Again, not a lot about them. But apparently they've got a whole thing in this region, and it's not clear if Queen Tagani has an alliance with them or has been fighting them, but things are pretty chill. And they're basically the other area in those islands that she doesn't really have control over. I would guess it's some kind of a treaty. Like, we've got this area where we've got our navy and port and whatnot, and you can have the deep jungle, and we don't really want that anyway. So bad devils live there. And there's also storm goblins in that region as well. I'm not quite sure what a storm goblin is. They may be buried in some creature collection, I can't recall. And they live on the island as well in the jungles. And there's 2 volcanoes. The island of Caria is basically built on each end of the island, kind of like Big Island of Hawaii. Rock and Forag. Yes, the volcanoes have names, and they're very namey names. And there's something funky and magical about these volcanoes, and spiritual. And Thulkos used to hang here. And yet there's jungle, so that's kind of interesting. I put upon that I think there's volcanoes are Ushada, are spirits, because spirits, the Ushada, are generally associated with an element, and I could easily envision a volcano itself being an Ushada in much the same way that, like, in a lot of Hawaiian and South Pacific mythology places around, religions place around volcano gods and goddesses, that maps to me that these volcanoes are meant to be that there's like an intelligence behind them. So that's neat. And that's the bulk of Kara. So
I'm going to throw in there, because it was brought up in chat, in Relics and Rituals, there's a relic that was crafted for the Queen recently by the great wizard Diosen. It is the Holy Sword of Caria, called Erator. It's interesting. So it talks about how so essentially the wizard agreed to make it if the Queen named the island or the country after his dead sister. He went into essentially confinement to make the sword, and after 3 years had passed and no word had been sent, the Queen sent a party of adventurers to figure out what the heck was going on. And they found that the stronghold was destroyed, overrun with trolls. When they found the sword, it was fully created, and it told them that it could speak. It's an intelligent weapon, and so it told them that trolls had overrun and killed the wizard. So the adventurers took the blade back to Caria and gave it to the Queen, who then gave it to her champion Barok to lead the crusade against the minions of Chardoon. What's really fun is that the sword is evil, and it lied to them. It doesn't really say what its point is. What is its, what's my motivation as an evil sword? But it is interesting. Yeah. That's a fun little tidbit. Thanks for sharing. Okay,
And
so Yuria.
that was a great way to cover that my Discord went down and came back. So
Right.
I thought we were done with my Discord crashing problems, but it's being persnickety today. So that's Uriah, because they need to sound similar, and both ending with RIA. Is the other island in the region. Not a lot said about here. It's a bunch of cool, groovy elves. So basically, a group of Ganges elves during the Divine War were really like Corian rocks, which didn't seem very elfy to me that they'd want to follow Corian, but they did. And they fought for Corian on his behalf in the Divine War. And he rewarded them with this island. And he's like, I found this island that nobody particularly, a couple of Titans spawned, but nobody else was living there, so you can have this island. And they're like, thanks, God. And they went and moved there. And they have these, and they're basically known for these giant birds called Hairier Birds. They're like rocks. They're, these big freaking, I don't know if they're huge or gargantuan, but they're, up there. She looks it up and says they're huge. Okay, in 5e they're huge, and they live on this island, and it's really inhospitable to anybody who doesn't have a way to fly, because it's basically big cliffs. This is not an island of beaches, and it's got like a bunch of elves living there who worship Corian and Denev, and they see Denev as in her role as Corian's mother, and she's the one who granted them these Hairier Birds. And they're kind of neat in that because they have these huge birds, they can show up just about anywhere, and they use these birds to do trading and whatnot with the other nations of Ghelspad. And they would, use them to travel to, say, the Ganges or to other areas, like Hairier Bird just showed up in the Gleaming Valley and is trading some elven fruit for, I don't know, Hollow Legionnaire mail or something. This is what they would do. So they would come up on these birds. So another ultimate, we need the eagles to come and rescue the hobbits MacGuffin would be elves on Hairier Birds showing up whenever, for whatever random reason, because Corian sent them. So kind of cool. But they're much more known for their diplomacy than anything else. They're not really known for trading much. They're not really known for warriors much beyond like shoot things on arrows at you from behind our great big birds. They apparently had some kind of an incident with the Ironbred, where the group of nomadic Ironbred in AD 147 that did not go well for the Ironbred, which was kind of sad. Whether they mistook them for Titan spawn or not, for unredeemed Titan spawn or not, or even knew about the concept of being redeemed, it's not clear. It's just a footnote. So, yeah. Anything else about Yuria?
So Fran brings up for Dead Man's Rest. For those of you who backed it, you got the full manuscript, not laid out, not edited anything, but the Sea Gate in the Golden City opens in a sea cave on Yuria.
On Yuria. So my thing about them going to Valley, I mean, it maps that they would be way allied with the Gleaming Valley because
makes
they're
sense.
Corian
Yeah.
followers. So, yeah. So in new lore now, well, these elves aren't big on trade. The gate that opens would be. Presumably there's some kind of an elven Hollow Legionnaire, Hollow Knight community there now, or when the ships arrive and go through the gate. So that's cool. And that makes sense. It totally makes sense that that's where it would be.
Hooray, building alliances. Good job.
Fran. Yeah. And it maps. And I think it's interesting because, like, followers of Corian, like, Chardoon, big nation, Denev is a big thing, Corian is, like, bought city-states. It's like Mithril, Gleaming Valley, Yuria, there's a couple of others. But Corian is very, like I've got my peeps. Like, very, very concentrated Corian followers. That. No, they're not, like, generalized. We are fanatic followers. Hadrada is that way, too, but I don't know. I like Corian. I like his vibe. Okay. Finally, we have the Drifting Isle.
Oh yeah.
Admittedly, my favorite of all of these random weird islands off of the coast of Western Ghelspad. The Drifting Isle, old lore and new lore, different, so that's interesting. Home of the Solemnaic, Solemn Fran shouting, Solemnaic from the living room, Solemnaic Vale. Real word, so it's not just a name. And it's where the Orophon live. They're like fawn centaurs, sort of. They're weird. I don't know if you have a picture of one of the Orophon to share or not, but
I did. I just gotta find it.
Oh, sweet. Okay. We were not that organized prepping for this one. So they kind of this wild island. Mysterious, definitely falls high on the list of mysterious islands. Olor says that it hasn't moved in 50 years, but prior to that, that it moved around a lot, and you weren't sure where you'd find it, and it had been seen off the coast of Fangsfall, and then it had been seen in the north, and that for the last 50 years or so, it's where it shows up on this map. New lore completely changes that. It makes it way more interesting. New lore, it's location unclear, somewhere off the coast. Could be any of those places. And it could even float above the sea in the sky. So that's new. It was not a flying island in the original lore, to my knowledge, unless it showed up as a flying island in some obscure text that I haven't stumbled across. But there is other flying things, so it certainly fits. It felt very La Puta to me. That's like, oh, suddenly the Drifting Isle is flying around. Cool. Literally my first instance of the idea of that it was flying around was in Travis's game when it was like, wait, we're what now? We're flying? I didn't know we could do that. But I didn't want to say anything, because I wasn't the GM. The Lomneich Vale, is where the Fane of Arias, the god of dreams, can be found. And I think that there's almost certainly some kind of portal or gate between this valley and the Plane of Dreams. Arias makes visits here a lot. The Orophons are followers of his, and it's all, groovy. If you go to this vale, you can make your dreams come true. I don't know if that's always a good thing. Like, they mean literal dreams, not like my wishes. No, like that thing you dreamt about. You're now in high school with no pants. So, not necessarily a good thing. But if you want to learn about dreams or anything like that, you either go to the Phylactric Vault or this island. And kind of near the Phylactric Vault could there be, I think almost certainly there's some communication between the two regarding that business. On the eastern side of the island, there's this little forest called the Nightwood, which is not a nice place. It's because the Vale is associated with dreams, associated with nightmares. Belsmith, being Arias's mother, has sort of a domain there, and she's considered sort of loosely the goddess of nightmares. And there's a lot of dark fae and lycanthropes who roam there. So definitely got an association with Belsmith in that region. So the Drifting Isle is not entirely safe place to be necessarily, because don't go in that wood. That wood's bad. But
so I was wrong. I didn't have. I thought I had a picture, but I do have. I snagged one from their Kickstarter. There's a tiny picture of an Orophon, which appears in the creature collection for 5e.
Which is in the creature collection, yeah. Orophon. They're not large. They're medium. Unlike a lot of other, and I guess, well, no, they're not shown as centaurs in the creature collection. I thought they were. I thought they had hands, but they're shown here as just as goats.
Yeah. What's really interesting is art
they're large
between
here.
them and the Almathian goat, they're almost the same. Their horns are a little different, but the art is almost the same. So yeah, they might have updated them for 5th edition.
Maybe. Darn it. See, we covered too many things this week. All over the landscape and too many books. And I admit I did not prepare for this. I didn't spend as much time preparing for this as I probably should have, given all the different resources this could come from. I will do more into this if we put stuff on the wiki. But I'm gonna look it up in the old creature collection, because I'm wondering if I'm getting them mixed up with something else.
Like Scarlands does have a lot of those centaur other versions. The Proud, obviously, the Scarai,
Proud, yeah.
Sandtaskers. I know there's more. I just can't think of them right now.
Centaurs, lion centaurs.
So any other...
Brandon's gonna be like, I've told you many times they're not centaurs. I don't know why you think they are. Why do you think they are?
Any other Drifting Isle stuff?
No, they're not. They're not centaurs. I don't know why I keep thinking they look the same in the old creature collection too. So I don't know why I thought they were like that. I think I was getting them mixed up with something. But they're cool. And they've got they've got a bunch of dream abilities.
Mm-hmm.
They're basically clerics of Arias, and they're really funky creatures. And they can like take care of people, and they're definitely good, and they're very altruistic. And the Drifting Isle, as long as you don't go in that bad forest, is a very peaceful, chill place. And one of the things they do describe in the new lore is that it will be where it needs to be, and if you want to go there, it's more likely to find you.
Yeah, it's a great hand-waving plot device. Thanks, Travis, for getting us from point A to point B via the Drifting Isle.
Flying Island, and I think that's why they made it flying in 5e, is so that it could be leveraged as because one of the challenges of and we've talked about this and how much I despise the travel log of the wandering monster travel thing. I ran too many campaigns of having, because back in the early 3.0 days when I was first starting to run D&D, and I ran Scarred Lands. I was like, I have to get they're level 4, and they have to get from Mithril to Mullistown, and they're gonna travel. And so I would literally run the tables, and I'd run the whole thing, and I'd be like, roll a d20, okay, positive, and so that they would have like 6 or 7 random encounters en route, and it was great when we were doing experience points distribution that way, and you got XP because of killing monsters and all that business. So it was XP on the hoof is what we called it. We would earn a ton of experience points while traveling by random monster encounters, and I just made sure that CR was appropriate, and there you go. But after a while, it got boring because it was very combat oriented and not really story oriented, and there was no reason to have these random fights other than to earn XP and maybe loot. But there wasn't like a plot reason. And that got annoying to me as a GM after a while, especially in later editions or later levels when combat got more tedious. Combat when you're first level, pretty easy. Combat when you're 10th level, pretty annoying because it's a really long fight. And tiring. So I like as soon as possible, like give them some other new ability. Like very early on, I was like, you have a helm of teleportation. Here it is.
Right?
Joy. You can get across Ghelspad faster now. We were talking earlier about the Wheel of Time. And the first book in the Wheel of Time, travel was like this big, huge process, big, difficult thing. And like by book 3 in the Wheel of Time, they found like 17 other ways to get around. It was way faster. And like, it's like that to me. And the Drifting Isle is a classic shit, I just need to get my party from point A to point B, and I
Yeah.
don't have a convenient wizard to teleport them. Look, a flying island has shown up. They can hitch a ride, and they can heal there and recover because it's really peaceful and chill.
Right. Right.
Oh, I need a little bit of XP on the hoof. Fine, they're gonna have a small adventure with these werewolves over here, and then they can go back. So there you go.
Yeah. Nice. Any other tidbits for this topic this week?
I know I haven't covered anything by far. I know there's a lot of detail, especially about those mercenary companies, and we kind of travel all over the place. I admit wholeheartedly that while I have done many adventures out of Vesh, I have not run much in Darakeene. Most of it was just, we're visiting the Phylactric Vault, or we're gonna go see Yugman. And I have not run a lot in Darakeene. So it's not a region I have really fleshed out. Like, I have mental maps of fucking Lave, you know, and I have now extremely detailed mental maps of areas of Calastia, or specifically New Veneer, and Shelzar, like, but Darakeene. And part of it is there was never a book on Darakeene. There was a book on Mithril. There was a book on
there were some
Calastia.
paragraphs. That was about it.
So I never really ran much. It was like a location you went to, you got a thing, and then you left. You know, it was never that. And I even having PCs who originated from there. I think in my 20 years of running Scarred Lands, with dozens of PCs from, you know, because all my players have played multiple characters. I think I've had one originate from there. Was a wizard from the Phylactric Vault.
Right.
So.
Well, why don't you give us your deets, Sarah?
I am Sarah Stewart. I am Scarred Lands obsessed. I wrote this book called Vigilant Through Shadows and Dreams, and I'm writing the sequel. Someday I might actually publish it. And I've written a whole mess of books on the Silurian Vault and otherwise, and including Crosslands of Fenrilik and various books, like Vigil, Patrol, something. Anyway, you can check out my stuff on Drive-Thru, and you can find me on Mondays, Travis Leg's game, Family Affair, and here on Fridays. And this weekend, you can find me at OrcaCon Online. I believe there's still room in 2 games. We're running 2 Scarred Lands games tomorrow and Sunday. And check it out. Fran, could you throw? I guess Fran can't throw the link in the doobly-doo.
She can.
I will throw.
She has the power.
Yeah. Oh, she can. Okay. One of us will throw the link in the thing, and yeah, you can check us out there. It's gonna be a really neat con. I can throw the link in there. Poor Orcagon.
Keep talking.
We're just gonna both link it. So yeah, check it out there. I'm gonna be running Into the Gorge from Frostlands of Fenrilik module, and probably Maritime Patrol, which is why I mentioned both of them, on Sunday. So if you've heard me babble about that and don't know if you want to pick them up, you can come play, and then if you like them, go buy them and then run them for your friends.
Totally.
And actually playing it from the person who wrote it. So there we go. And I have 1 opening left in the Sunday game and 2 openings left in the Saturday game. So it's $2 if you want to guarantee a slot. And if you want to just risk it, just sign up for the con and ask about it in their Discord chat. And if no one's filled the slot, then you can join us.
Nice. And I am Jeremy Hochhalter. I am the host here at WH Publications on Twitch. Over on Twitter, you can find me at WH Pubs. On Facebook, also WH Publications. On Mondays, I'm in the same game with Sarah and Fran on Travis's channel here on Twitch, which is Plastic Age Plays. Come over and join us for a family affair. It's a hoot. On Wednesdays, I play in another game by Chaz Calendar. He's running a Final Fantasy XIV inspired 5e game, which also is a ton of fun. And in February sometime, I should be getting back to Curiosity Cache, which is my Scarred Lands 5e campaign here on Twitch. I publish stuff on Drive Through RPG and DM's Guild. Follow along for tons of fun. We will see you next time. Thanks for joining us. Bye.